The rain pounded against the windshield of Ethan Parker's luxury SUV as he navigated the muddy rural roads of Vermont. The GPS had lost signal 20 minutes ago, but he didn't need it. Even after nearly a decade away, his hands remembered every turn leading to Riverdale Acres. Lightning flashed across the darkening sky, illuminating the sprawling farmland that stretched out before him. Somewhere in that expanse lay the property he had inherited 6 months ago, following his grandfather William's passing. The lawyer's call had come as a surprise. Ethan had always assumed the farm would go to a closer relative, someone who actually cared about agriculture, not a 35-year-old tech entrepreneur whose idea of nature was the carefully manicured rooftop garden of his Seattle penthouse. "You've reached your destination," he muttered to himself, mimicking the GPS voice as the familiar wooden archway came into view. The hand-carved sign reading Riverdale Acres, Esther 1932, hung slightly askew, battered by years of neglect and harsh weather. Childhood memories flooded back as his tires crunched over the gravel driveway. Summer vacations spent chasing fireflies, his grandfather teaching him to ride horses, the smell of his grandmother's apple pie cooling on the kitchen windowsill. For a moment, he could almost forget the urgent business meetings he'd rescheduled, the investors waiting on his newest software prototype, the perpetually buzzing phone he'd silenced upon crossing the county line. A commotion near the main barn pulled him from his reverie. Through the curtain of rain, he could make out two figures locked in what appeared to be an intense confrontation. Ethan squinted, turning off his engine to better observe the scene. A man in a weathered cowboy hat towered over a woman, jabbing, his finger accusingly in her face, while she clutched a folder protectively against her chest. "I know it was you, Sophia," the man shouted, his voice carrying despite the downpour. "Those receipts didn't just disappear on their own. Hand them over, or you'll be looking for another job, not that anyone else would hire a thief." Ethan watched as the woman, Sophia, squared. Her shoulders, her stance defiant despite being thoroughly soaked. "I didn't take anything, Mr. Reeves. I've worked here for 22 years. I would never—" "Save it!" The man, presumably this Mr. Reeves, grabbed for the folder, causing the woman to stumble backward into a puddle. "William's not here to protect you anymore. I run things now, and I say you're done." Something snapped in Ethan. Before he could process his actions, he was out of the car, rain instantly plastering his designer clothes to his skin. "Hey!" he called out, striding purposefully toward them. "What's going on here?" Both figures froze, turning toward him in unison. The woman looked bewildered, while the man's expression shifted from anger to confusion, then to disbelief, as recognition dawned. "Mr. Parker," Reeves stammered, immediately stepping away from Sophia. "We weren't expecting you. The lawyer said you were too busy to—" "Clearly," Ethan interrupted, coming to stand between them. Up close, he could see Sophia more clearly, a woman in her early 50s with intelligent eyes and streaks of silver in her dark hair. She was soaked to the bone but maintained a dignity that impressed him. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Ethan Parker, William's grandson." "Sophia Martinez," she replied, her voice steady despite the situation. "I was your grandfather's household manager and accountant for over 2 decades. "And I'm Victor Reeves," the man interjected, attempting to regain his composure. "Farm manager. If I'd known you were coming, I would have prepared—" "What I'd like prepared," Ethan cut in, "is an explanation for why you're accusing a long-term employee of theft in the middle of a downpour." Victor's face hardened. "With all due respect, Mr. Parker, you've been gone a long time. There are complexities to running this operation that include public humiliation." Ethan turned to Sophia. "What exactly is he accusing you of stealing?" Sophia hesitated, glancing between the two men. "Financial records," she finally said. "Receipts for equipment purchases from the last quarter. Mr. Reeves says I took them to hide discrepancies, but I was actually compiling them for the quarterly." "Review?" A flash of something, guilt, fear, crossed Victor's face so quickly Ethan might have imagined it. "Show me," Ethan demanded, gesturing to the folder she still clutched. Victor stepped forward. "Now hold on. You can't just waltz in here after all these years and start—" "Actually, I can." Ethan's voice took on the steel edge his business competitors had learned to fear. This is my property, Mr. Reeves. Everything here, including your employment, exists at my discretion." The rain continued to pour as silence fell between them. Sophia cautiously handed Ethan the folder, which he opened to find meticulously organized receipts and handwritten notes. "Let's continue this inside," Ethan said, noticing Sophia's slight shiver. "My grandfather's office should still be in the main house, correct?" Sophia nodded, relief visible on her face. The walk to the main house was tense and silent. Ethan noted the peeling paint on the wraparound porch, the missing shingles on the roof, small signs of neglect that his grandfather would never have tolerated. Something was definitely wrong at Riverdale Acres. Inside, Sophia quickly found towels while Victor stood awkwardly in the entryway, his hat in his hands. The house smelled musty, as though it had been closed up too long. "Now," Ethan said, settling behind his grandfather's desk, "I'd like to understand what's really happening here." Over the next hour, a disturbing picture emerged. Victor's explanations grew increasingly convoluted, as Sophia calmly pointed out inconsistencies in the farm's financial records. Equipment purchased, but nowhere to be found. Services billed at triple the market rate. Contracts with distributors that heavily favored outside interests. "Enough," Ethan finally said, raising a hand to halt Victor's latest defensive ramble. "Mr. Reeves, I came here intending to spend 48 hours sorting out my grandfather's affairs before returning to Seattle. But it seems I've inherited more than just land and buildings." Victor's face had gone pale. "Sir, I can explain everything if given the chance." "You're fired," Ethan stated flatly. "Effective immediately. You have until tomorrow noon to remove your personal belongings from the property." The stunned silence that followed was broken only by the continued drumming of rain against the windows. "You can't do this," Victor finally sputtered. "You don't know the first thing about running a farm. You need me." "What I need," Ethan countered, "is someone I can trust." He turned to Sophia, who had remained quiet throughout the confrontation. "Ms. Martinez, would you be willing to take over as general supervisor, at least temporarily, while I assess the full situation?" Sophia's eyes widened in surprise. "Mr. Parker, yes, I would, but there's so much you need to know about what's been happening here." "Then you'll tell me," Ethan said, rising from the desk. "Starting tomorrow morning. For now, Mr. Reeves needs to leave." Victor's face contorted with fury. "You'll regret this, both of you." He jammed his hat back on his head and stormed out, the front door slamming behind him. As the sound of his truck engine faded into the rain, Ethan turned to find Sophia studying him with an unreadable expression. "That was impulsive," she observed quietly. "I've been told it's one of my defining qualities," Ethan replied with a wry smile, "for better or worse." "Your grandfather was the same way," Sophia said, a hint of something like nostalgia in her voice. "There's more of him in you than you probably realize." Outside, the storm intensified, as if nature itself was acknowledging that something significant had just changed at Riverdale Acres. What Ethan couldn't possibly know was that his impulsive decision had set in motion events that would transform not only the farm, but his entire life in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. The morning after the storm broke clear and crisp, with sunlight spilling across the rolling hills of Riverdale Acres. Ethan rose early, his body remembering the rhythms of farm life despite his years in the city. He stood on the porch, coffee in hand, surveying what was now his responsibility: the sprawling fields, the cluster of barns and outbuildings, the orchard that stretched toward the eastern horizon. "You're up early," Sophia's voice came from behind him. She carried a thick leather ledger and several folders. "Most city folks sleep until at least 8. Ethan smiled, noting how different she looked in the daylight. Confident, capable, with an earthy elegance that belonged perfectly to this place. "Old habits. Grandpa William never let me sleep past sunrise when I visited. Said the day was half gone by 7. Something flickered across Sophia's face, recognition, perhaps nostalgia, before she nodded toward the kitchen. "I've set everything up inside. Fair warning, it's worse than I indicated yesterday." Worse proved to be an understatement. For the next 3 hours, Ethan pored over ledgers, contracts, and bank statements, the gravity of the situation becoming increasingly clear. The farm wasn't just struggling, it was on the brink of collapse. Victor signed a distribution contract, that gives Heartland Agricultural Holdings exclusive rights to our produce at 30% below market value, Sophia explained, pointing to a document bearing both Victor's signature and what appeared to be his grandfather's, though Ethan noted the latter looked oddly stiff. We're essentially paying them to take our crops. Ethan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. And these loan terms, the interest rate nearly doubled last quarter. How did the bank justify that? They cited increased risk factors, Sophia replied, her tone making clear what she thought of that assessment. Around the same time Victor began telling everyone you were planning to sell the property. Ethan's head snapped up. What? I know, Sophia said simply. William would never have left this place to someone who'd sell it off. That's why I stayed, even after things started going sideways. Ethan studied her, noting the deep connection to the farm evident in her every gesture. How many people work here now? 28 full-time. Another 40 seasonal workers when harvest comes. Most have been here for generations. The Martinez family has worked Riverdale land since your great-grandfather's time. Pride tinged her voice. But it's not just employees. The farm supports the processing plant in town, the local markets, 3 school lunch programs. The weight of responsibility settled more firmly on Ethan's shoulders. This wasn't just a property to be sorted out and sold. It was the economic backbone of an entire community. Show me everything, he said, standing abruptly. I need to see what I'm fighting for. The tour took the rest of the day. Sophia drove him across the property in a weathered pickup truck, explaining operations, introducing workers, pointing out where maintenance had been neglected. At each stop, Ethan noted both the problems and the potential. The irrigation system needed overhaul, but the water rights to the creek were worth a fortune. The apple orchard had been poorly pruned, but the heritage varieties couldn't be found anywhere else in the state. The dairy operation was running at half capacity, but their artisanal cheese had once won national awards. And this, Sophia said as they crested a hill late in the afternoon, is what makes it all worthwhile. Below them stretched a vista that took Ethan's breath away. Golden fields rolling toward distant mountains, the late afternoon sun painting everything in amber and rose. A sense of connection washed over him, something primal and undeniable. My mother used to bring me here, he said quietly. When I was very young, before she left for the city. Sophia's expression softened. Eleanor loved this view. She'd sit up here for hours sometimes, sketching. Ethan turned to her in surprise. You knew my mother well? A moment of hesitation then. I knew everyone at Riverdale. It was a different place then. Before he could press further, Sophia's phone buzzed. She checked it, her expression darkening. We should head back. Visitors at the main house. The visitors turned out to be a sleek-looking man in an expensive suit and a woman with a tablet, both standing on the porch with the air of people accustomed to getting what they want. Ah, there he is, the man called out as Ethan and Sophia approached. The prodigal grandson returns, Maxwell Whitaker, Vice President of Regional Acquisitions for Heartland Agricultural Holdings. He extended a manicured hand, which Ethan reluctantly shook. I was just telling Ms. Torres here that we had an appointment, but she seemed unaware. The woman, presumably Ms. Torres, gave an apologetic smile. I just work in the main house. Mr. Reeves handled all the business meetings. Victor Reeves is no longer employed here, Ethan stated flatly, and I don't recall scheduling any meetings with Heartland. Maxwell's smile didn't falter. Oh, it wasn't with you specifically. Victor and I had a standing arrangement to discuss our ongoing offer for the property. I understand you're a busy man, Mr. Parker. Tech industry, isn't it? Must be difficult to manage your company and a failing farm from opposite coasts. The farm isn't failing, Sophia interjected, stepping forward, and it's not for sale. Maxwell barely glanced at her. I was addressing Mr. Parker. After all, he's the one with the authority to make such decisions. Something in his dismissive tone made Ethan bristle. Ms. Martinez speaks with my full authority as general supervisor, and she's right. Riverdale isn't for sale. Perhaps not today, Maxwell conceded with an indulgent smile, but do look over our latest offer. He handed Ethan a sealed envelope. We're prepared to assume all debt obligations, which I understand are substantial. You could walk away clean, return to your real life without this charming distraction. Ethan kept his expression neutral, though anger simmered beneath. I'll review it, but don't expect a different answer. Just be sure you're making an informed decision, Maxwell replied, his gaze shifting briefly to Sophia before returning to Ethan. Some of your employees might not have your best interests at heart. Change is inevitable in this industry, Mr. Parker. Small family operations simply can't compete with modern agricultural business models. The smart play is to recognize that reality before circumstances force your hand. The thinly veiled threat wasn't lost on Ethan. I appreciate your concern for my financial well-being, he said coolly. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a farm to run. After they departed, Ethan tore open the envelope. The offer inside made him whistle low. This is significantly above market value, which should tell you everything, Sophia responded, taking the paper and scanning it. Heartland has been buying up every farm in the valley. They've acquired 14 properties in the last 3 years. Why the aggressive expansion? Water rights primarily. Control the water, control everything. But there's more. She hesitated, then continued. Have you heard of monopolistic agricultural practices? Ethan shook his head. They buy farms, centralize operations, cut the workforce by 2/3, then choke local markets with price manipulation. Small producers who refuse to sell can't compete and eventually fold. They're systematically dismantling the agricultural independence of this entire region. Ethan considered this as they walked back, into the house. Victor was helping them. It wasn't a question, but Sophia nodded anyway. The financial irregularities, the sabotaged equipment, the rumors about selling, all designed to devalue the property and increase your debt burden until selling became the only viable option. Anger flared in Ethan's chest. Well, they picked the wrong farm to target. I may not know much about agriculture, but I know predatory business tactics when I see them. What are you going to do? Sophia asked, studying him with newfound interest. Ethan pulled out his phone. First, I'm extending my stay, indefinitely. Second, I'm calling my financial team to restructure the debt. He looked around the shabby kitchen, his mind already racing with plans. Third, we're going to rebuild Riverdale Acres from the ground up. The look Sophia gave him was complex, part approval, part concern, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Your grandfather would be proud, she said quietly, but you should know what you're getting into. Heartland won't take this lying down, and Victor has friends in this community. I'm counting on that, Ethan replied with a grim smile. The best way to expose corruption is to make the corrupt people nervous. Besides, he added, his expression softening slightly, I've been needing a break from the tech world. My last startup was acquired 6 months ago, and I've been feeling directionless. So you're treating a struggling farm as a passion project? Sophia's tone held a note of challenge. No, Ethan said, meeting her gaze directly. I'm finally taking responsibility for my family's legacy. This place meant everything to my grandfather. I owe it to him to at least try to save it. Something in Sophia's expression shifted then, a subtle softening, a reassessment. In that case, she said, you'll need to meet Dr. Harper tomorrow. She handles all our livestock veterinary needs and runs the regional agricultural extension. Office, if anyone can help us turn things around, it's her. Dr. Harper, Ethan repeated, committing the name to memory. First thing tomorrow, then. As dusk settled over Riverdale Acres, Ethan found himself drawn back to the porch, watching shadows lengthen across fields that now weighed on his conscience. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Seattle. Meetings missed, decisions pending, colleagues concerned. For the first time in years, he let them wait. Something more important had taken hold, a connection to this land that ran deeper than he'd realized, a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with stock options or venture capital. Behind him, through the kitchen window, he could see Sophia on the phone, gesturing animatedly as she spoke. He caught fragments. He's staying different than I expected. Needs to know eventually. That last bit piqued his curiosity, but Ethan turned away, respecting her privacy. Everyone had secrets, himself included. For now, he had more. Immediate concerns: a farm to save, a community to protect, and a corporate predator to outmaneuver. What he couldn't possibly anticipate was how deeply his life would become intertwined with Riverdale Acres, or how the secrets buried in its soil would shake the very foundation of his identity. "You've got to be kidding me," Dr. Olivia Harper said, examining the dairy cow's swollen udder. "This is mastitis, and it's widespread. How long has this been going on?" Ethan, who had been watching the veterinarian work for the past hour, shook his head. "I don't know, I've only been here 5 days. Dr. Harper straightened, fixing him with a penetrating gaze. She was younger than he'd expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid and intelligent green eyes that missed nothing. Her worn jeans and work boots spoke of someone who spent more time in barns than offices, despite her impressive credentials displayed in the mobile veterinary unit parked outside. "Well, Mr. Parker, your dairy operation is in serious trouble. At least 8 cows with untreated infections, outdated milking equipment that's causing teat damage, and," she gestured to the feed bins, "substandard nutrition. I'm surprised you're getting any milk at all, let alone anything marketable." Ethan winced. "Please, call me Ethan, and I appreciate the candor. What do we need to do?" Her eyebrows rose, clearly surprised by his receptiveness. Most new owners don't want to hear the ugly truth. "I'm not most owners," he replied simply. "I need to understand exactly what we're facing." Something in his tone must have convinced her. For the next 2 hours, Dr. Harper led him through a comprehensive assessment of the livestock operations, detailing immediate interventions and long-term improvements. Ethan took notes diligently, asking questions that revealed his technological background, but also his genuine desire to learn. "You're actually serious about this," she observed, as they walked toward the apple orchard, where Sophia was waiting, to discuss the upcoming harvest. "Did you think I wasn't?" Dr. Harper shrugged. "Word travels fast in small communities. The tech millionaire who inherited his grandfather's farm, most assumed you'd sell to Heartland and disappear back to your real life." "So I've gathered," Ethan replied dryly. "And what do you think, Dr. Harper?" "Olivia," she corrected, "and I think Riverdale deserves someone who cares about more than the bottom line. The question is whether that's you." Their eyes met, a moment of connection that surprised them both with its intensity. Ethan found himself noticing details he'd missed earlier. A small scar above her left eyebrow, the dusting of freckles across her nose, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence. The moment was broken by Sophia calling from the orchard entrance. "There you are. I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost." "Just getting a thorough education," Ethan replied, forcing his attention back to business. "Dr. Harper, Olivia, has identified several urgent issues with the dairy operation." Sophia nodded, unsurprised. "Victor redirected the maintenance budget for the milking equipment 3 times last year. I flagged it, but..." She shrugged, the rest of the sentence unnecessary. "I can recommend some equipment upgrades that won't break the bank," Olivia offered. "And I'd like to put you in touch with my brother. He runs an agricultural engineering firm that specializes in sustainability solutions for family farms." "That would be helpful," Ethan said gratefully. The orchard inspection revealed another set of challenges: inadequate pruning, signs of early blight, and damaged irrigation systems. Yet, amidst the problems, Ethan found himself increasingly drawn to the farm's potential. The heritage apple varieties were irreplaceable, with complex flavors no mass-produced orchard could match. The location, with its southern exposure and natural windbreaks, was ideal. Even the soil, when Olivia scooped up a handful for him to examine, had a rich quality that spoke of generations of careful stewardship, at least until recently. "Your grandfather understood the delicate balance of this ecosystem," Olivia explained, letting the dark soil filter through her fingers. "He practiced regenerative agriculture before it had a fancy name. That's why this land has remained productive for nearly a century, while neighboring farms depleted their soil and had to rely increasingly on chemical inputs." "My grandmother mentioned something similar," Ethan recalled. "She always said Grandpa William talked to the land and it answered with abundance. Sophia, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke. Eleanor understood that connection too. She used to help with the harvest every year, even after she moved to the city. At least until... Until what? Ethan prompted when she didn't continue. An awkward silence fell before Sophia shook her head. Ancient history. What matters is saving what's left. The harvest festival is in 6 weeks. Traditionally, it's when we showcase our products to regional buyers and secure contracts for the coming year. 6 weeks isn't much time, Ethan mused, mind already calculating resources and priorities. It's not, Olivia agreed, but a strong showing could change the narrative around Riverdale. Right now, most people believe what Victor's been telling them, that the farm is failing and will inevitably be sold to Heartland. Then we'll just have to prove them wrong, Ethan said with determination. Let's make this harvest festival the best Riverdale has seen in years. The ensuing weeks transformed both the farm and its unlikely new steward. Ethan threw himself into the work with the same intensity he'd once devoted to tech startups. Mornings found him in the barns with the dairy team. Afternoons in meetings with distributors or financial advisors, evenings poring over agricultural research and market analyses. He invested in essential equipment repairs, brought in specialists to address the most urgent issues, and worked alongside the farmhands whenever possible, earning their grudging respect through sweat and persistence. Sophia proved invaluable, her deep knowledge of the farm's operations complementing Ethan's fresh perspective and business acumen. Together, they began to turn the tide, addressing the most critical problems while developing a sustainable long-term strategy. Olivia became a frequent visitor, ostensibly to monitor the dairy herd's recovery, but increasingly offering advice on broader agricultural matters. Ethan found himself looking forward to her visits, valuing not just her expertise, but her company, the way she challenged his assumptions, her dry humor, her evident passion for the region's agricultural heritage. "You're not what I expected," she admitted one evening as they sat on the porch, watching fireflies emerge over the fields. A month had passed since his arrival, and the farm had already begun to show signs of revival. "No?" Ethan smiled, relaxed in her presence in a way he rarely experienced. "What did you expect?" Someone more corporate, less willing to get his hands dirty. She gestured to his calloused palms, evidence of his hands-on approach to farm management. "I've always believed in understanding problems from the ground up," he explained. "Can't fix what you don't comprehend. Besides," he added with a self-deprecating smile, "there's something satisfying about physical work. In tech, success is abstract. Lines of code, user metrics, valuation adjustments. Here, success is tangible. You can literally taste it." Olivia studied him with thoughtful eyes. "Heartland offered you $8 million for this place. That's a lot to walk away from." "It's not about the money," Ethan said quietly. "It never really was. I've made enough in tech to live comfortably for several lifetimes. This is about," he searched for the right words, "connection, purpose, legacy." "Speaking of legacy," she said, shifting topics, "my grandmother wants to meet you. She doesn't get out much these days, but she's asked about you several times." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Your grandmother?" "Rose Harper. The local healer, though most people around here call her the herb woman or medicine woman. She's been a fixture in this valley for 7 decades, knows more about plant medicine than most pharmacologists. I'd be honored to meet her," Ethan said sincerely. The following Sunday, Olivia drove him to a small, immaculately kept cottage at the edge of town. Gardens surrounded it, not decorative flower beds, but carefully tended plots of medicinal herbs and plants, many of which Ethan couldn't identify. Rose Harper sat in a rocker on the porch, her dark eyes bright and alert despite her advanced age. She studied Ethan intently as they approached, her gaze so penetrating he felt as though she could see beneath his skin to the very core of him. "So," she said when introductions were complete, "William's grandson has finally come home." "I'm not sure I'd call it home just yet," Ethan replied honestly. Rose smiled, the expression transforming her weathered face. "The land recognizes its own, whether you do or not. You have Parker blood, and Parker blood has been tied to that land for generations. She gestured for him to sit beside her. Tell me, have you been to the North Creek yet, where the 3 oaks stand together? Ethan shook his head, surprised. I didn't know there was... You should go, she interrupted. Some places hold memories the mind forgets, but the heart remembers. Her gaze shifted to Olivia, who was arranging tea things nearby. My granddaughter has been spending a great deal of time at Riverdale lately. Olivia rolled her eyes affectionately. I'm the farm's veterinarian, Grandma. That's my job. Rose hummed non-committally, her knowing smile causing both younger people to blush slightly. The conversation meandered through local history, herbal remedies, and agricultural traditions. Ethan found himself captivated by Rose's stories of the valley's past, including several about his own grandfather that he'd never heard before. William Parker stood against the chemical companies in '78, she recounted. When everyone else was switching to the new pesticides, he refused. Said he wouldn't poison his land for a quick profit. They tried to ruin him for it, called him backward, superstitious. But time proved him right. The farms that embraced those chemicals saw their soil die within a decade. Riverdale remained strong. Until recently, Ethan acknowledged. Land can recover, Rose assured him, with the right steward. Her penetrating gaze returned. You're facing the same battle your grandfather did, just with different players. Heartland is more dangerous than the chemical companies ever were. They don't just want to sell you something, they want to erase you entirely. As they were leaving, Rose pressed a small fabric pouch into Ethan's hand. Herbs for clarity, she explained. Steep them in hot water when decisions weigh heavy, and come back soon. There are things about your family you should know. On the drive back to Riverdale, Ethan found himself unexpectedly at ease with Olivia, sharing stories of his childhood visits to the farm and his life in the tech world. In turn, she spoke of her journey from local farm girl to veterinary school and back again, driven by a desire to preserve the agricultural traditions of the valley. I had offers from prestigious practices in Boston and New York, she admitted. But this place, it gets in your blood. I'm beginning to understand that, Ethan said softly. They were nearing the farm when Olivia suddenly asked, Why did you really stay? The truth. Ethan considered the question, wanting to give her an honest answer. At first it was principle. I hated the idea of being manipulated into selling. Then it became about justice, making things right for the people who depend on this place. He paused. But now I think I'm discovering parts of myself I never knew existed. Parts that belong here. Olivia smiled, a genuine expression that lit her entire face. That, she said simply, is the right answer. As they pulled up to the farmhouse, however, the moment of connection was shattered by the sight of a familiar, luxury car in the driveway, sleek, black, and distinctly out of place. Isn't that, Olivia began. Maxwell Whitaker, Ethan confirmed, his expression hardening. Looks like Heartland is getting impatient. What neither of them could know was that Maxwell's visit would set in motion events that would not only challenge Ethan's commitment to Riverdale, but would unearth long-buried secrets that would forever change his understanding of his family's past and his own future. This is harassment, Ethan stated firmly, standing in his grandfather's office, now his, with arms crossed as he faced Maxwell Whitaker. Showing up unannounced, attempting to intimidate my staff. Intimidate? My dear Mr. Parker, I was merely having a friendly conversation with Ms. Martinez about Riverdale's production forecasts. Maxwell's smile remained impeccably polished, though it didn't reach his eyes. After all, we still have a distribution contract. A contract signed under dubious circumstances, which my legal team is currently reviewing, Ethan countered. And any discussions about farm business should go through me, not my employees. Maxwell's gaze drifted to Olivia, who stood quietly by the doorway. Ah, Dr. Harper, picking up strays again? Or is this a professional visit? Both, Olivia replied coolly. And I believe Mr. Parker has made it clear your presence is unwelcome. The corporate executive chuckled, straightening his already impeccable tie. Very well, but before I go, he placed a manila folder on the desk. Consider this a courtesy. Victor Reeves has accepted a position with Heartland as our new regional production supervisor. Given his intimate knowledge of Riverdale's operations, we felt it only fair to inform you." Ethan kept his expression neutral, despite the surge of anger. Fascinating career progression, from sabotaging one farm to potentially sabotaging many. "Strong accusation," Maxwell replied, his smile tightening. "I'd be careful about making such claims without evidence." "Who said I don't have evidence?" Something flickered in Maxwell's eyes, the first crack in his composed facade. "In any case, our offer to purchase remains open for another 2 weeks. After that," he shrugged elegantly, "market conditions change rapidly in this industry." After Maxwell departed, Ethan released a long breath. That man makes tech venture capitalists look like kindergarten teachers. "He's worried," Sophia observed, having entered silently during the exchange. "Heartland's entire regional strategy depends on acquiring Riverdale. We control too many water rights and too much strategic land." "Which explains why they planted Victor in the operation," Olivia added. "Speaking of whom, we should alert neighboring farms about his new position. If he was willing to sabotage Riverdale, he won't hesitate to target others." Ethan nodded, already reaching for his phone. "I'll call a community meeting. Saturday at the old Grange Hall." He paused, glancing at Sophia. "Unless you think that's too soon. The Harvest Festival preparations are well underway," she assured him. "The crew has the orchard situation under control, and the dairy production has already improved by 30%, thanks to Dr. Harper's interventions." "Olivia," the veterinarian corrected automatically, a small smile playing at her lips. "We're well past formalities at this point." The three worked late into the evening, planning both the community meeting and Harvest Festival strategies. When Sophia finally excused herself to check on the evening milking, Ethan found himself alone with Olivia, suddenly aware of the comfortable familiarity that had developed between them over the past weeks. "You didn't have to stay," he said, gesturing to the scattered papers and notes covering the desk. "This must be cutting into your other commitments." "Riverdale is my priority right now," she replied simply, then added with a slight blush, "Besides, I like working with you. Your approach is refreshing." Something warm unfurled in Ethan's chest. "Even though I still can't tell alfalfa from Timothy grass?" "Especially because of that," she laughed. "You ask questions instead of pretending to know. It's a rare quality." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might say more. Instead, she glanced at her watch and stood abruptly. "I should go. Grandma will be waiting up." "Of course," Ethan said, rising as well. "Thank you for everything. I wouldn't have made it this far without your help." "Yes, you would have," she countered softly. "You're more capable than you realize, Ethan Parker. You just needed to find the right soil to put down roots." After she left, Ethan wandered the quiet house, too restless for sleep. Rose Harper's words echoed in his mind. "Some places hold memories. The mind forgets, but the heart remembers." On impulse, he grabbed a flashlight and headed out into the night, drawn to the North Creek she had mentioned. The path was overgrown but still discernible, winding through fields and into a small wooded area he hadn't yet explored. The creek gurgled softly in the darkness, leading him to a clearing where 3 massive oak trees stood sentinel, their ancient branches intertwining overhead like protective arms. Ethan's flashlight beam played across the base of the center tree, revealing a weathered carving in the bark. "April J. 6 forever." Below it, a date from 35 years ago. "E," he murmured, tracing the letter with his finger. "Eleanor, my mother." But who was J? A twig snapped behind him, and Ethan whirled, his flashlight beam catching Sophia's startled face. "I'm sorry," she said, raising a hand to shield her eyes. "I saw the light moving across the north field and thought—" She trailed off, noticing where he stood. "You found it." "What is this place?" Ethan asked, lowering the flashlight. "And how did you know I'd be here?" Sophia approached slowly, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "It was your parents' special spot. Your mother and father would meet here before your grandfather forbade their relationship." Ethan stared at her, struggling to process this information. "My father?" But I never knew my father. My mother always said he abandoned us before I was born. A long silence stretched between them, filled only with the soft sounds of the night forest. She lied, Sophia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. To protect you both. From what? Ethan demanded, a lifetime of questions suddenly bubbling to the surface. Who was he? What happened? Sophia sighed deeply, gesturing to a fallen log. You might want to sit down. This is a long story, and one I promised your grandfather I'd only tell if you asked directly. She settled beside him. Your father was Jake Martinez, my brother. The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. Your brother? But that would make you... Your aunt. Yes. Sophia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. And the reason I've stayed at Riverdale all these years, watching over the place where my brother's son would someday return. Over the next hour, a family history Ethan had never known unfolded beneath the ancient oaks. How his mother, the daughter of wealthy landowners, had fallen in love with Jake Martinez, the son of farm workers. How William Parker had forbidden the relationship, threatening to disinherit Eleanor if she continued seeing that Mexican boy. How Jake and Eleanor had planned to elope, only for Jake to suffer a serious work accident that left him temporarily paralyzed. Your mother discovered she was pregnant while Jake was still recovering, Sophia explained. William found out and gave her an ultimatum. Leave Jake and return to the city with her inheritance intact, or stay and lose everything. With Jake unable to work and a baby on the way, she chose security, Ethan finished, a hollow feeling spreading in his chest. She chose you, Sophia corrected gently. Eleanor loved my brother deeply, but she knew what poverty could do to a child's opportunities. She left believing it was the only way to give you a better life. And my father, what happened to him? Sophia's expression clouded. Jake recovered physically but never emotionally. He left the valley, drifted for years. We lost touch. She paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. Until last spring when he returned to make peace with William before his health failed completely. Ethan's head snapped up. My father is alive, and he was here. Did my grandfather? They reconciled, Sophia assured him. William had carried his regrets for decades. In the end, he acknowledged the pain he'd caused. That's when he changed his will, leaving Riverdale to you instead of selling it as he'd originally planned. Does my father know about me, that I'm here? The questions tumbled out, his mind reeling with implications. He knows you exist, of course, but he respected Eleanor's decision to raise you separately from him. Sophia hesitated. Jake lives in Clearwater now, about 50 miles north. He's been ill but stable. I could arrange a meeting if you wanted. Ethan stood, overwhelmed, pacing before the three oaks as he tried to process this revelation. His entire understanding of his family history had just been upended. The resentment he'd harbored toward an unknown father who had supposedly abandoned him, the way he'd idealized his grandfather, all built on carefully constructed lies. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He finally asked, his voice raw with emotion. It wasn't my place, Sophia replied simply. William asked me to let you settle here first, to form your own connection to Riverdale without the weight of the past influencing your decisions. She rose, moving to stand beside him. And I needed to know what kind of man you'd become before entrusting you with my brother's heart. Ethan turned to her, suddenly seeing the family resemblance he'd somehow missed. The same determination in the set of the jaw, the same expressive eyes. And what kind of man am I? Sophia smiled, reaching up to touch his cheek in a gesture so familiar it made his chest ache. A Parker in your drive and ambition, but a Martinez in your heart and conscience, the very best of both. They walked back to the house in contemplative silence, the night air heavy with revelation. At the porch steps, Ethan paused. I'd like to meet him, my father. I'll make the arrangements, Sophia promised, after the harvest festival, one challenge at a time. The following days passed in a blur of activity. The community meeting drew a larger crowd than expected, with farmers from across the valley gathering to hear Ethan's warnings about Heartland's tactics and Victor's new role. Initial skepticism gave way to concerned murmurs as Sophia presented documentation of Riverdale's near sabotage. "They're targeting the most vulnerable properties first," Ethan explained, standing before maps that highlighted Heartland's acquisitions, creating a stranglehold on water access and transportation routes. "Once they control those, the rest will fall like dominoes." "What do you suggest we do?" called out Frank Wilson, whose dairy farm bordered Riverdale to the east. "Some of us can barely make payroll, let alone fight a corporate giant." "We unite." Olivia spoke up from where she stood near her brother, the agricultural engineer she'd introduced to Ethan the previous week. "Heartland's strategy depends on picking us off individually. Together, we have leverage." Over the next 2 hours, a plan emerged, a cooperative approach to resources, equipment sharing, collective negotiation with distributors, and a legal defense fund for those facing pressure tactics. Ethan pledged technical support, offering to develop systems for coordinating these efforts. As the meeting concluded, he found himself surrounded by farmers who had arrived suspicious but were leaving with cautious hope. The sense of purpose that had been growing within him solidified into certainty. This was where he belonged, fighting for this land and these people. "You missed your calling," Olivia commented as they cleaned up afterwards. "You should have been a community organizer." Ethan smiled, surprisingly comfortable with the idea. "Maybe this is exactly where I was meant to end up. Just took a detour through Silicon Valley first." The Harvest Festival preparations intensified in the final weeks, with the entire Riverdale staff working tirelessly to ensure their products would shine. Ethan divided his time between festival coordination, implementing the community support network, and preparing for his eventual meeting with the father he'd never known. 3 days before the festival, disaster struck. Workers arriving for the morning shift found several storage buildings had been broken into overnight. Vital equipment was damaged, irrigation controls tampered with, and a section of the apple orchard inexplicably drenched with a chemical that left the fruit inedible. "This is Victor's work," Sophia fumed as they surveyed the damage. "Same tactics he used last year on a smaller scale, but now he has Heartland's resources behind him." Ethan's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Maxwell Whitaker. He answered on speaker, his voice controlled despite his anger. "Interesting timing for vandalism, wouldn't you say, Maxwell?" "Terrible business," the executive replied, his tone dripping with false sympathy. "I've just heard about your misfortune. These rural areas can be so vulnerable to criminal elements. Perhaps now you'll reconsider our offer. It's still open, though circumstances necessitate a 15% reduction given recent developments." "You know," Ethan replied conversationally, "for someone supposedly not involved, you seem remarkably well informed about specific damage that occurred less than 2 hours ago." A slight pause. News travels fast in small communities. "So does evidence," Ethan countered. "Security cameras are wonderful things, especially the hidden variety my tech team installed 3 weeks ago." He gestured to Sophia, who gave him a thumbs up as she reviewed footage on her tablet. "I wonder how your board would react to video of Heartland's new supervisor trespassing and committing property damage. Corporate sabotage carries significant legal penalties." The silence on the other end stretched longer this time. "This isn't over, Parker," Maxwell finally said, his polished veneer cracking. "You're out of your depth here." "Actually," Ethan replied, "I'm exactly where I need to be. And unlike you, I have nothing to hide." He ended the call, turning to find both Sophia and Olivia watching him with matching expressions of approval. "Did you really get him on camera?" Olivia asked. Ethan grinned. "Better. I got 3 of Heartland's contracted. Workers clearly visible, with Victor directing them from his company truck. The cameras were my backup plan after we discovered the first signs of tampering last week." "Always the strategist," Sophia observed proudly. "Now, how do we salvage the festival? We've lost nearly 30% of our showcase products." Ethan considered the challenge, his mind already racing with possibilities. "We pivot. Instead of hiding the sabotage, we showcase our resilience. Make it part of our story." He turned to Olivia. "Can your brother get us the mobile soil testing lab he mentioned? We'll demonstrate live how we're transforming affected areas." She nodded. "He can be here tomorrow." "Perfect. Sophia, contact the other farms in our new cooperative. Let's feature their products alongside ours. Emphasize our community approach." His eyes gleamed with determination. "Heartland thought they could break us. Instead, they've given us a rallying point." As sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Ethan stood on the hill overlooking Riverdale Acres, mentally cataloguing all that had changed in the 6 weeks since his arrival. The farm was still struggling, but now with purpose and direction. The community had begun to rally around his vision of cooperative resistance. And he had discovered connections to the land, to its people, and to a family history both more painful and more rich than he'd ever imagined. Footsteps approached from behind, and he turned to find Olivia making her way up the slope, her hair loose around her shoulders for once. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. "They're worth at least $1 in this economy," he joked, then sobered. "I was just thinking about choices. 6 weeks ago, I was going to spend 48 hours here, sign whatever papers needed signing, and return to my real life. And now? Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." He turned to face her directly. "I've spent my entire adult life chasing success as defined by others, venture capital, acquisitions, market share. For the first time, I'm pursuing something that matters, on a human scale." "The farm?" she asked softly. "Yes," he acknowledged. "But not just that." Ethan took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "You asked once why I stayed. The complete answer is complicated, but part of it is standing right here." Olivia's eyes widened as his meaning registered, her expression shifting from surprise to something warmer. "Ethan..." Whatever she might have said was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching rapidly on the main drive. They turned to see Sophia's truck skidding to a halt near the house, her figure leaping out and running toward the porch, clearly searching for someone. "Something's wrong," Ethan said, already moving downhill, Olivia close behind. Sophia spotted them and changed direction, her expression grave. "Ethan, thank goodness, it's Jake, my brother. He's been admitted to County General. His condition has deteriorated suddenly and..." She hesitated, then continued more gently. "The doctors say he doesn't have much time. If you want to meet your father, it needs to be now." The world seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet as the moment he'd both dreaded and longed for arrived with unexpected urgency. He felt Olivia's hand slip into his, an anchor in the sudden storm of emotion. "I'll drive you," she offered quietly. As they rushed toward her vehicle, Ethan was acutely aware of how thoroughly his life had transformed since that rainy evening 6 weeks ago. He was heading to meet a father he'd never known, leaving behind a farm he was fighting to save, accompanied by a woman he was falling in love with. Nothing had turned out as he'd expected, and somehow that felt exactly right. The hospital corridor seemed endless as Ethan followed Sophia toward the intensive care unit, his heart hammering against his ribs. Olivia had insisted on coming along, offering quiet support from a respectful distance. Now she waited in the family lounge while the 2 blood relatives approached the room where Jake Martinez lay waiting. "He knows you're coming," Sophia assured him, pausing outside the door. "He's been waiting for this moment for longer than you can imagine." Ethan nodded, unable to form words past the tightness in his throat. A lifetime of questions, resentments, and unacknowledged longing converged in this moment. "What do you say to the father you've never met? What could possibly bridge 35 years of absence?" The man in the hospital bed looked both nothing and everything like what Ethan had imagined. Though clearly weakened by illness, Jake Martinez possessed the same strong features as his sister, with gray-streaked dark hair and eyes that lit up with recognition when Ethan entered. "You look like her," were his first words, voice rough but warm. "Your mother's eyes, exactly." Something broke open inside Ethan at those simple words, the acknowledgement of connection, of shared history. "Everyone always said I looked like my mother's side," he managed, moving closer to the bed. Jake smiled faintly. "They weren't wrong, but I see myself there too now that you're standing before me." He gestured weakly to a chair. "Sit, please. We have much to talk about and limited time." For the next hour, Ethan listened as Jake filled in the missing pieces of his life story. The passionate young man who had fallen deeply in love with Eleanor Parker, their dreams of building a life together despite her father's disapproval, the accident that had changed everything. "I don't blame her for leaving," Jake emphasized, his gaze steady on Ethan's face. "She made the right choice for you, and I wasn't in any state to be a father then. The bitterness consumed me for many years." "But you never reached out even later," Ethan said, unable to keep the note of accusation from his voice. Jake's expression held deep regret. "By the time I'd put myself back together, you were nearly 10. Eleanor had married, given you a stable life with a stepfather who raised you as his own. What right did I have to disrupt that? To make a child choose between the only father he'd known and a stranger with nothing to offer but complicated emotions?" The simple, painful logic of it silenced Ethan's objections. He thought of his stepfather, a kind, steady presence who had taught him to ride a bike, attended his science fairs, supported his early interest in computers. The man he had called Dad without a second thought for most of his life. "I watched from a distance," Jake continued softly. "Sophia would send me news when she could. Your high school graduation, your college acceptance, your first startup company. I was so proud, though I had no right to that pride." "And then you came back here to see my grandfather?" Jake nodded. "I was diagnosed last year, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It clarifies priorities, facing your own mortality. I needed to make peace with William before—" He left the sentence unfinished. To my surprise, he felt the same. "We were two old men, with too many regrets and too little time." "He left me the farm," Ethan said, still struggling to reconcile this new understanding of his grandfather. "Was that his way of making amends?" "Partly," Jake acknowledged, "but also because he recognized something in you that the rest of us had missed. That beneath the successful tech entrepreneur was a soul that would eventually need roots, community, purpose beyond wealth creation." He reached out, his hand trembling slightly. "I understood that too once I saw you through Sophia's updates. You have your mother's brilliance, but your heart. That's pure Martinez." Ethan took his father's hand, struck by how natural the contact felt despite their lifetime apart. "I wish I had known sooner. We've lost so much time." "Time is a strange thing," Jake replied, his eyes drifting to the window where late afternoon light streamed in. "Some connections exist outside its constraints. I've felt you with me always, even when we were separated by a continent." His gaze returned to Ethan's face, suddenly intent. "Promise me something." "Anything," Ethan said without hesitation. "Live a life that matters to you, not just to the world. Find work that feeds your soul, love that challenges you to grow, and place you can pour your roots into." Jake squeezed his hand with surprising strength. "And take care of Riverdale. Not for William's legacy or mine, but because that land has always been where our family's story lives." "I promise," Ethan whispered, understanding now that his inexplicable connection to the farm had been embedded in his very DNA, waiting to be awakened. They talked until Jake grew tired, sharing stories that filled in the vast empty spaces of their separate lives. As Jake drifted to sleep, Sophia returned, her eyes questioning. "He's exactly who I would have wanted my father to be," Ethan told her quietly as they stepped into the corridor. "How could I have lived so long without knowing such an essential part of myself?" Sophia embraced him, the aunt he'd only just discovered but who had silently watched over him for decades. "You know now. That's what matters." The drive back to Riverdale was quiet, each person lost in private reflections. Olivia sat in the back seat, respectfully allowing Ethan and Sophia their family moment, while offering her steady presence as silent support. As they crested the hill overlooking the farm, Ethan asked Sophia to stop the truck. The setting sun cast Riverdale acres in golden light, transforming the land into something magical. Not just soil and crops and buildings, but living history, the physical manifestation of loves and losses and choices that had shaped generations. "I need to make some calls," he said suddenly, pulling out his phone. We have 24 hours until the Harvest Festival, and everything needs to be perfect. You still want to go through with it? Sophia asked, surprised. After today, no one would blame you for postponing. Jake wouldn't want that, Ethan said with certainty, and neither would my grandfather. The best way to honor them both is to save what they loved. Through the night and into the following day, the Riverdale team worked with renewed purpose. News of the sabotage had spread through the community, bringing unexpected support. Neighboring farmers arriving with trucks of produce to supplement what had been damaged, local craftspeople offering displays, even townspeople volunteering to help with setup. By noon, the festival grounds hummed with activity. Booths showcased not just Riverdale's products, but those of the entire newly formed cooperative. Olivia's brother had set up his mobile soil testing lab, drawing crowds with demonstrations of remediation techniques. Children chased each other between hay bales and apple bobbing stations, while musicians tuned instruments on the small stage. I can't believe we pulled this off, Ethan marveled, standing with Sophia and Olivia as the festival officially opened. A week ago, I would have said it was impossible. Not impossible, Sophia corrected. Just improbable. The Martinez family specialty. Olivia squeezed his hand. I need to check on Grandma Rose's herbal demonstration, but I'll find you later. He nodded, watching her walk away with a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the autumn sunshine. She's good for you, Sophia observed with a knowing smile. Rose Harper's granddaughter and Jake Martinez's son, a fitting continuation of the Valley's story. The festival exceeded all expectations. Regional buyers, impressed by the community solidarity and innovative approaches on display, signed contracts that would secure the cooperative's financial stability through the coming year. Environmental journalists tipped off about Heartland's sabotage and the subsequent legal actions, conducted interviews that would bring national attention to corporate agricultural predation. Even the weather cooperated, providing a perfect, crisp, full day that showcased the valley at its most beautiful. Late afternoon found Ethan standing somewhat apart from the festivities, taking a moment to absorb the transformation of the past. 7 weeks. From reluctant inheritor to passionate defender, from rootless entrepreneur to man embedded in community and family, the journey had been both unexpected and somehow inevitable. Mr. Parker. The familiar voice cut through his reflections. Maxwell Whitaker approached, looking distinctly uncomfortable in his tailored suit amid the casual festival atmosphere. Quite the event you've orchestrated. Mr. Whitaker, Ethan replied neutrally. I'm surprised to see you here given the circumstances. Maxwell glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. I've come with a message from the Heartland Board of Directors. In light of certain evidence that's come to their attention, they've decided to suspend all aggressive acquisition activities in this region. His polished veneer couldn't quite disguise his discomfort. They've also accepted my resignation, effective immediately. Ethan raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. That was unexpected. Apparently, corporate sabotage exceeds their ethical boundaries, Maxwell said stiffly, particularly when documented on video and delivered to both the board chairman and 3 major financial publications simultaneously. How unfortunate for you. Indeed, Maxwell straightened his tie unnecessarily. For what it's worth, it was never personal. This valley represents significant strategic value. He extended his hand. No hard feelings. Ethan considered the gesture, then shook his hand briefly. Your tactics were reprehensible, but I respect your attempt at a graceful exit. I suggest a career change, Mr. Whitaker. Predatory acquisition seems to disagree with you. As Maxwell walked away, Olivia appeared at Ethan's side. What did he want? To announce his surrender, essentially, Ethan explained, still processing the unexpected development. Heartland is backing off, at least for now. The evidence worked. Her face lit up with a brilliant smile. That's incredible news. So we should tell everyone. Not yet, he decided, taking her hand. There's something I need to do first. Will you come with me? They slipped away from the festival, driving the now familiar route to the county hospital. Jake was awake, looking marginally stronger than the previous day, his face brightening when they entered. "How's the festival?" he asked immediately. "A triumph," Ethan assured him, pulling a chair close to the bed. "The cooperative's secured contracts that will keep everyone afloat through next harvest, Heartland's backing off, and the community's more united than it's been in decades." He leaned forward, eyes alight with purpose. "But I've been thinking about the future, not just surviving, but thriving." For the next hour, he outlined the vision that had been forming in his mind, a technology-enhanced agricultural cooperative that would leverage both traditional farming wisdom and modern innovation, software to optimize irrigation and reduce water usage, direct-to-consumer platforms that would bypass corporate distributors, equipment sharing systems managed through a central database. Riverdale would serve as the innovation hub, he explained, with satellite operations throughout the valley. We'd pool resources, share risk, and operate with transparency that would make predatory tactics impossible. Jake listened intently, asking occasional questions that revealed a sharp mind for business despite his physical weakness. When Ethan finished, his father smiled with unmistakable pride. "You've found it," he said simply. "Found what?" "Your purpose. The place where your gifts meet the world's needs." Jake's gaze shifted to include Olivia. "And the right partner. To build it with, I think." Olivia blushed but didn't contradict him, her hand finding Ethan's in a gesture that felt increasingly natural. "I need to make this right," Ethan said softly. "Not just for Riverdale, but for all of it. The separated families, the divided community, the land that's been treated as a commodity rather than a legacy." "You already are," Jake assured him. "By being exactly who you are, a Parker and a Martinez, bridging worlds that should never have been divided." When they returned to Riverdale that evening, the festival was winding down but still vibrant with community energy. Sophia met them at the entrance, her expression both worried and hopeful. "How is he?" "Stronger today," Ethan replied, embracing his aunt. "And fully supportive of our plans for agricultural revolution." She laughed, the sound brightening the twilight. "Of course he is. Revolucionario has always been the Martinez family motto." She gestured toward the small stage where the band was setting up for the evening's final performance. "They're waiting for you." Ethan looked puzzled. "For me? Why?" "Because apparently you're the one who saved harvest season," she replied with a smile. "Go on. The community wants to thank you properly." As Ethan made his way through the crowd, accepting handshakes and expressions of gratitude from people who had been strangers just weeks ago, he felt something settle within him, a sense of belonging he'd never experienced in all his years of tech industry success. On stage, he looked out over the gathered faces, farmers and townspeople, workers and families, all connected to this land and to each other through generations of shared history. Olivia stood near the front, her face upturned to his, Rose Harper beside her with a knowing smile. Sophia watched from the side, the keeper of family secrets now free to acknowledge their shared blood openly. 7 weeks ago, Ethan began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd, I arrived at Riverdale Acres intending to spend 48 hours settling my grandfather's affairs before returning to what I thought was my real life. Soft laughter rippled through the audience. I had no idea that decision would lead to discovering not just a farm worth saving, but a community worth fighting for, a family I never knew I had, and purposes I never imagined pursuing. He paused, searching for words equal to the moment. The easy path would have been to sell to Heartland, take the money, return to Seattle, continue building technology that makes life incrementally more convenient for people who already have too much. More knowing chuckles. Instead, I found myself choosing the harder path, standing with all of you against corporate interests that would reduce this beautiful valley to nothing more than a line item on a quarterly profit report. Ethan's gaze swept across the crowd, noting familiar faces that had become dear to him in such a short time. What I've learned these past weeks is that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or stock options. It's measured in community resilience, in soil health, in sustainable systems that will nourish generations to come. He gestured to the festival grounds around them. This, all of this, is worth fighting for. And I'm committing now, publicly, to staying at Riverdale Acres permanently, to implementing the cooperative model we've begun to build, and to ensuring that this valley remains in the hands of the people who love it most." The applause that followed was deafening, people rising to their feet in a wave of support that washed over him like a physical force. As he stepped down from the stage, Olivia was waiting, her eyes bright with something that looked remarkably like love. "Did you mean that?" she asked quietly as the band began to play. "About staying permanently?" "Every word," Ethan replied, taking her hands in his. "I've spent my life building things that make money. Now I want to build something that matters, here with these people." He hesitated, then added softly, "With you, if you're willing." Her answer came not in words but in action as she leaned forward and kissed him, a promise and a beginning rolled into one perfect moment. Around them the community celebrated, the music swelled and Riverdale Acres pulsed with renewed life. 1 year later, the transformation was complete. Jake Martinez had defied medical expectations, his condition stabilizing enough for him to move into the farmhouse at Riverdale, where he spent his days sharing agricultural wisdom with his son and strengthening their bond with each passing week. Sophia had finally claimed her rightful place as family rather than employee, her expertise continuing to guide the farm's operations while she trained a new generation of workers. The Valley Agricultural Cooperative that Ethan had envisioned was now a reality, with 15 farms sharing resources, technology, and market access. The software platform he'd developed had streamlined operations while preserving each farm's unique character and approach. Heartland had withdrawn completely from the region, their predatory tactics exposed and their reputation damaged by the media coverage that followed. On a perfect autumn afternoon, much like the one that had hosted the Harvest Festival a year before, Ethan stood on the hill overlooking Riverdale Acres, Olivia beside him. Their fingers were intertwined, her grandmother's engagement ring now gracing her left hand after Ethan's proposal the previous month. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed," he admitted, surveying the thriving operation below. The dairy barn had been renovated, the apple orchard restored to health, and new greenhouses gleamed in the distance, extending the growing season through innovative, sustainable designs. "Are you happy with your choice?" Olivia asked, though she already knew the answer. "Beyond measure," Ethan replied without hesitation. "I came here thinking I was sacrificing 6 months to save my grandfather's farm. Instead, I found my father, discovered my true calling, and fell in love with both a place and a person." He turned to face her fully. "Every morning I wake up certain that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Behind them, the 3 oak trees that had witnessed his parents' forbidden love now stood as silent guardians of a new chapter in the family story. Ethan had brought his mother to visit during the summer, a tearful, healing reunion with the place and people she had left behind decades ago. Eleanor and Jake had sat beneath those oaks for hours, finding closure and forgiveness in conversation, long overdue. The future stretched before them now, not without challenges, but rich with promise. The next Harvest Festival would feature the cooperative's first line of value-added products. The local school would benefit from a technology education program Ethan was establishing, and the valley's reputation for sustainable agricultural innovation was growing nationally. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the land in golden light, Ethan and Olivia turned toward home, where Jake, Sophia, and Rose waited for them to begin the evening meal. A family reunited and expanded, healing old wounds while creating new traditions. "You know, Ethan," said as they walked hand in hand down the hill, "when I first arrived that rainy night, all I could see were the problems, the peeling paint, the financial chaos, the broken equipment. And now?" Olivia prompted. "Now I see the potential in everything," he replied, his voice rich with certainty. "Just like my grandfather did, just like my father taught me to. This land doesn't just grow crops, it grows resilience, community, purpose." He smiled at her. "And love, apparently." "Apparently," she agreed, returning his smile with one of her own. As they reached the farmhouse, voices and laughter spilled from the open windows, a beacon of warmth in the gathering dusk. Ethan paused at the threshold, taking one more glance at the land that had changed him so completely in just 1 year. "Welcome home," Olivia said softly. And it was. The home he'd never known he was searching for, the legacy he'd never expected to claim, and the future he was now building with every choice every day, rooted deeply in the soil of Riverdale Acres.